So we start the clock. So this talk is going to be about building model native apps with Hypermode. The QR code there goes to these slides. It's also in that document. I'll drop it in the Discord too. So my name's Will. I work for a company called Hypermode. Here's my contact details there, another chance to grab the slides. So at Hypermode, we build and maintain open source projects to make it easier to build and host model native apps. This includes Modus, which is a serverless API framework, Dgraph, which is a scalable real-time graph database, Badger, which is a key value store, and Ristretto, which is a cache library. And then all these tools are open source, but we aim to be the best cloud hosting experience for these tools. So what is a model native app? Well, if we think of like the three-tier architecture of building apps, how we used to do things, the client would hit some application server. If we wanted to scale this up, we need to deploy another server. Our data sources are like relational databases that are hard to scale, these sorts of things. Like, we don't really do this much anymore. Instead, the abstractions that we think about are like functions for like serverless deployment. We need to think of like how we incorporate AI models into our apps, data and APIs, and then also knowledge graphs are becoming like more and more important, especially for AI workflows. So let's take a look at how Modus works. This is our open source serverless framework. So functions are the abstraction here. You write a function. Modus does some really interesting things to enable polyglot application development. So we can support multiple languages. Currently, we support AssemblyScript, which is a TypeScript-like language, and Go. We're looking at adding more soon. So we leverage WebAssembly for that polyglot experience. So we compile your code to WebAssembly. We inspect the types that you've defined, the signature of your function to generate a GraphQL API. Anyone using GraphQL these days? A few folks? Cool. And then because we're leveraging WebAssembly, there are some really cool things we can do with sandboxing, memory safety, speed, these sorts of things. So this is just one example of how Modus enables you to build these model native apps. And we think of Modus as kind of enabling building blocks for building these model native apps. So the building blocks here are things like chaining data into your LLM calls, or enabling function calling or tool use, where we're allowing the LLM to make decisions about what data sources to interact with. And then finally, this idea of knowledge graph RAG, or leveraging like rich context in a knowledge graph as part of the retrieval augmented generation process. And so for this reason, in Modus, we're adding support for more and more data connectors. We recently added support for Neo4j, which we're going to look at in a second here. But I want to talk about how easy it is to get started with Modus. So let's take a look here. The first thing we're going to do is install the Modus CLI from npm. I've already installed this. This won't really do anything. And then I'm going to run Modus new. So the Modus CLI is going to allow me to create new projects. We can choose from Go or AssemblyScript. I'm going to do AssemblyScript. We'll just pick a name at random and get started. This is going to skeleton out my Modus project. And if I take a look here, this created a few files in my project. The interesting one here that we'll look at first is this Modus JSON file. This is our app manifest, where we would declare connections to APIs or incorporate other models. And then the other interesting thing here is this index.ts file, which is just a very basic hello world function. So it takes an optional name and returns hello world or maybe that name. So let's do a Modus dev. So now Modus is going to compile that and serve a local GraphQL API. We have a API Explorer, kind of like Graphical or GraphQL Playground if you've ever used that. So we have a single function here. We can run it, hello world. I can say hello Will, get back hello Will. Cool, so that's the very basic. That's not super exciting. Let's take a look at a more complex example. Let me run this one. And so this is an example from what we call our Modus recipes. This one. our Modus recipes GitHub repo, which has a bunch of getting started examples. One of them is the Neo4j Modus starter kit, which uses Neo4j's recommendations data set, which is actually one I built when I worked there. It combines Movie Lens and IMDb, so like information about ratings and reviews of movies and this sort of thing. And what we do here, we take a look at the code. So there's two pieces. There's the front end and the back end. In the back end, we are pulling in the mini LM embedding model, which is hosted on Hypermode, which we can leverage for free. And we can generate embeddings for these movies and then write them back to Neo4j. So here we're querying Neo4j, generating embeddings, and then updating that data in Neo4j so we can do vector search. So if we take a look at this app here, so the front end is a Next.js app that uses Apollo client, so we can search for movies, and then we get recommendations of similar movies. And here we're using Neo4j's vector search to look at the embedding for the plot description of Cosmos and find similar movies in vector space using vector search. So I'm not? Am I not? I'm not showing it. Oh no. Something froze. Something froze there. Am I not in the, should I unshare? Entire screen, share. Bam. There we go. Cool. So yeah, so that's the app, which is a great resource for the hackathon. Vaibhav was just talking about how if you're able to combine multiple technologies here, I think that's a really cool thing that we're going for. So this example from Modus recipes of using Neo4j and Modus together might be a good place to start. There's several other examples here. Using Dgraph for things like GraphQL workflow over markdown files, function calling. So that's also a good resource as well. And I'll drop this in the Discord. Cool. So that's about all I had to say. Just one thing, we have a few Hypermode folks here. Matt, who's the lead engineer on Modus, and Ryan in the back there, who's head of engineering at Hypermode. So they'll be around for the next couple hours. I will be also, as we're hacking on projects. I think Matt might be one of our judges. So feel free to grab them if you need help going through this. And yeah, I'd love to chat with folks about all things Hypermode. Thanks.